And now, for a session presented by Accor, please welcome the Chief Sustainability Officer at Accor, Brune Poirson, in conversation with SkiftX Content Director, Alison McCarthy.
Hi, Brune. Thanks so much for joining us. It's great to have you here.
Hi, it's great to be with you today. Thank you very much for welcoming me.
Yeah, so you just completed your first full year at Accor as Chief Sustainability Officer, and you oversee the brand's commitments to sustainable development. Congrats. So I'd just love to start off by hearing about Accor's overarching sustainability strategy and then how it fits in with the company overall.
So I think, first of all, I think it's important when it comes to sustainability. I think very often we tend to think that it's about, having good feelings and that it's a moral issue. But what we say, and really the basics of all our work, is that everything should be based on science and hard facts. So what did we do? We basically took the IPCC reports and we sort of mapped what it means for and what it meant for companies such as Accor. So based on that, what we've done is that we've decided to focus our sustainability strategy, which is, and I will come back to that, more than a strategy, but really a transformation plan for the company. We decided to focus on two sort of key priorities, which is equal opportunities on one hand, so really the social aspects and putting them at the heart of what we do in terms of sustainability. And second, the issue of nature and biodiversity. Now, you may say, why are they talking about nature and biodiversity? Well, because actually, if you want to reach carbon neutrality, you need to actually invest much more in nature. And we tend to think, but that's also because we are a European company, we tend to not only think, but actually act in a way that puts biodiversity much as a priority, because if you are to reach carbon neutrality, well, you actually have to invest in nature and biodiversity. And we have a very strong regulation coming up in Europe. And so as a European company, that's why we decided to focus really on both legs. And then what we do is that we take those priorities, working on the basics of the SBTN framework, which is the equivalent of SBTI, but for nature, and building on SBTI to actually roll out our strategy. So that's really sort of our objective. And what it means is that we're actually setting ourselves obviously very ambitious objectives, such as, for example, carbon neutrality by 2050, which concretely means, because we're not going to wait for 2050 before we start actually implementing concrete actions. So it means basically reducing by almost half for our scope 1 and 2 emissions by 2030, and also a host of other objectives and targets on nature, such as, for example, trying and aim for being 100%, having 100% eco-designed brands by 2030, being zero imported deforestation by basically 2025. Anyway, I don't want to be too long and I don't want to go through the whole list, but that's how we work and that's our priorities.
Amazing. So it sounds like Accor has a really holistic perspective on sustainability. So you touched a bit on how Accor thinks about biodiversity in general. I'd just love to hear some details about some of the specific initiatives around biodiversity that Accor has launched recently.
So first of all, we just have to map. So where is our biggest impact on basically nature and biodiversity? If you look at things, it's mostly on our scope 3. We have 10,000 bars and restaurants. And so this is how a lot of our impact on the environment is, especially if you look at land use or if you look at agriculture and all of that. This has a huge impact on our ability to reduce our CO2 emissions. So our objectives, we've set a series of objectives, obviously, as I mentioned, and for 2023, what we really want to focus on is really reduce our water impact and footprint, be it in terms of quality of water, but also quantity of water. Second priority is really obviously fighting food waste, because, as you know, 1/3 of the world's food is actually wasted. We know that in our hotels it's pretty much equivalent, even though we still have to make a lot of progress in terms of measuring our food waste impact. And our third priority will be on fighting deforestation. As you know, it's pointless trying to reduce your CO2 emissions when you're actually providing your clients with food that directly comes or indirectly comes from deforestation, which, as we know, is not only killing a carbon sink, but also helping emit, responsible for a lot of the world's CO2 emissions. So that's how we will go about actually design. That's our priorities, and that's what we will focus on in 2023. So again, most importantly, I talk about objectives, I talk about priorities, but it's also obviously it has a lot to do about how do we implement things. So we believe very strongly in terms of putting and including sustainability objectives and nature-based objectives in our carbon footprint, in the bonus of the managers, be it executive committee, but also our CEO and most of our people. And then that's one of the ways we believe we can implement actually an impactful strategy.
And can you give any examples of any specific properties, any programs? I know that there's something in Fairmont in the Maldives.
Exactly. So, for example, in Fairmont in the Maldives, we actually decided to launch a program to protect beaches and most importantly, the ocean. And so we can talk about the Maldives, obviously, where we have actually launched a program to help protect corals and involve actually our guests, because we think that it has a lot to do with obviously embarking our guests. And for example, one thing we believe in which I think might be surprising to a lot of people, is actually not always providing guests or telling guests what they want to hear. We also believe that very often, as a private company, our responsibility is to push for things, actions, projects that our guests might not necessarily be ready for. So that's why, for example, we decided to get rid of all the single-use plastic that is guest-facing. Very often, increasingly less, but we still have guests who tend to complain, for example, about the fact that they don't have access to, or they don't have as many single-use plastic products as they used to. But we believe it's our responsibility to basically raise awareness and sort of educate our guests. Sometimes they're really willing to be working with us. That's what we do in the Maldives. And more, to take a bit a step up, one of the things also that we've done is that we've launched a partnership with La Fondation de la Mer, which is a French NGO. And we've decided to actually map, for most of our hotels, map their impact on the ocean. Because we believe, and it's not us, but it's actually the science that shows that every single company has, or every single hotel, I should say, has an impact on the ocean, on the sea, be it directly or indirectly.
Amazing. And then what has some of the feedback been among locals, conservationists? You did go into a bit about the feedback of guests. So yeah, what are people thinking?
I think the feedback is very good. As I said, it's not always obviously easy, because sometimes you actually have to share a lot with your guests, really explain that. And that means that you need to train your staff. You need to also make sure that you walk the talk. But the result and the welcome that we've had, obviously, was very good. And that's one of the reasons why we decided to actually step up and sort of roll out those programs really as much as we can across the world.
Great. And I feel like people are really starting to realize that these investments are only going to become more important over time due to climate change. So I feel like there's often a stereotype that only luxury hotels are the ones that can take action around sustainability when it comes to protecting their local environments and communities. Obviously, they have a lot more resources to invest in programs like this. So how would you respond to this?
So what I would say is actually that's not true. Obviously, one of the things that we do, we try and so in our eco mid-scale hotels, for example, we work a lot, as I said, on shifting the food menus, and this has a direct impact. And same with food waste, for example. If you reduce food waste, obviously it equals savings, and savings actually so it's a positive impact on your finance, but also on the environment. And so it's by showing really very concretely, very concretely what it can bring to the hotels financially and environmentally, that we can bring them on board. And in addition to that, I believe I believe a lot of the eco and mid-scale hotels, at least for us in Europe, are located in areas where agricultural practices are different, or where there's a lot of, as we say, I don't know how you say in English anyway, more sort of organic food and different types of agricultural practices. And so we try and partner with those smaller size companies, and that actually helps not only sometimes reduce costs, but also make the quality of the food better. It's better for guests, and it creates really a virtuous cycle. And so that's why we're actually embarking a lot of our eco and mid-scale hotels, and a lot of them are actually, surprisingly so maybe, very, very and highly motivated to do that.
Great. We are running low on time. I just love to get one very quick takeaway that you'd give to other hotels that would like to develop their own biodiversity initiatives.
I would say first, really, it sounds obvious, but more is not always the best. Sometimes, as I said, and we've done a lot of work on that for breakfast, for example, having 4 different types of yogurts may not necessarily no longer be what guests want. Maybe it's better to really focus on quality. And so it's a huge, favoring quality over quantity can have huge positive impact, be it for the bottom line, I mean, in terms of financial aspects and environmental aspects. So don't hesitate to actually explore that and question the assumptions that your guests have, and actually share information with your guests, because providing them what they want is not, as surprising as it may be, is not always obviously what they themselves expect.
Great. That's a great way to wrap up. Thanks so much for joining us today, Brune. It was really great to have you. And if you want to learn more about Accor's biodiversity initiatives, you can visit their press page on their website, which is available through the QR code on your screen, or check out Accor's showcase page on the SpotMe virtual platform. Thanks so much, everyone.